My neighbor thought I was spying on her. Turns out we were both being watched. So this happened about a year ago, but it still messes with my head. I had just moved into this apartment complex, nothing fancy. Just a quiet, older building. My neighbor across the hall, let's call her Jenna, was friendly at first, but after a few weeks, she started acting weird around me. Wouldn't say hi anymore. Started giving me these suspicious looks like I'd done something. One night I stepped out onto my balcony for a smoke and heard her on the phone through her open window. She said something like, "He's always watching me, it's creepy." I froze. Was she talking about me? A few days later I found a note taped to my door that said, "Please stop watching me. This is your final warning." I was honestly stunned. I'm awkward, yeah, but I'm not a stalker. I didn't even know what to say, so I just left it alone and tried to avoid her. Then things got weirder. I started hearing noises in the walls late at night, like light tapping or crawling sounds. At first I thought maybe rats, but it didn't sound like animals. It sounded human. Eventually I called maintenance. They opened up this panel in the back of my closet and found a crawl space that led between several units, mine, Jenna's, and a few others. Inside they found a mattress, food wrappers, and a freaking phone full of pictures. Of me. Of Jenna. Other people too. Turns out, someone had been living in the walls of our building. He used to be a contractor or something and knew all the weird backways and vents. He'd been sneaking around at night, watching people through cracks and vents and God knows what else. Jenna thought I was watching her. I thought she was paranoid. We were both wrong. The guy was arrested. I moved out 2 months later. I still check closets and vents wherever I live now, just in case. I found out my dad had a secret family after he died. I always thought my dad was the most loyal man I knew. Turns out, I didn't even know half his life. He passed away suddenly last year, heart attack. I was devastated. He was my hero, my biggest supporter, the one who taught me how to ride a bike and never give up on anything. Mom was heartbroken, of course, but she handled all the paperwork and funeral stuff while I tried to hold it together. A few weeks later, I got a call from a lawyer asking me to come in for a reading of the will. I thought it was weird since my mom was already handling everything. But when I got there, I saw another woman sitting in the office, with 2 kids around my age. I remember the lawyer saying, "It seems we need to divide the assets among all 3 of his children." I froze. "What do you mean 3? The woman, quiet, nervous, looked at me and whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't know he told you nothing." Turns out, my dad had another family. A woman he'd been seeing for nearly 20 years. The kids, my half-siblings, had known about me their entire lives. They even had pictures of me on their walls because he told them I was their other sister. But he never told me anything. I went home that night and just sat in my car for hours, crying. I felt like my whole childhood had been a lie. How could someone so loving, so present, also be living a double life? My mom admitted she'd always suspected something but didn't want to destroy the family. I didn't talk to either side for months. But eventually, I met my half-siblings for coffee. They were kind. They looked so much like him it hurt. We talked for hours. And maybe, in some strange way, I realized he was deeply flawed, but we were all just pieces of him trying to make sense of the wreckage he left behind. My parents' 25-year-old ghost story. This is my parents' story. Everyone who was involved in this experience still talks about it to this day because of how bad it scared them. I've always been fascinated by it, so I wanted to share it on Reddit. Right after my parents got married, they decided to find a small place together and start their new life with each other. They found a cheap 2-bed, 1-bath house close to my dad's job. They weren't picky since it was meant to be temporary until my mom finished nursing school and they could save enough to buy a home. They moved in shortly after finding it, got settled, and for the first month everything was completely normal. That was until my dad's grandmother gave them a little clown figurine she'd found at a yard sale. It was one of those vintage wind-up ones that spins in a circle and plays a creepy old children's song. My mom has always hated clowns and thought it was unsettling, but she didn't want to be rude, so she put it up on a shelf in their kitchen and tried to ignore it. Not even a week later, she started noticing it would randomly spin and sing by itself. Sometimes it would start up when she walked past it, when she was home alone, and in the middle of the night for no reason at all. It kept happening until she finally decided to throw it out. She tossed it into the trash and figured that was the end of it. A few days later, after the garbage had already been picked up, she walked into the kitchen and found the clown sitting right back on the same shelf. My mom was freaked out and showed her him all. The second she picked it up, the clown's head started spinning rapidly while the rest of it stayed still. My dad's mom, who's very religious, immediately started praying over it, then drove it straight to the dump herself. They never saw it again. But after that, everything in the house just seemed to get worse. One day, my mom was in the driveway unloading groceries when she saw a tall man in a black hat standing about 10 feet away from her by a tree, staring directly at her. She tried to not make eye contact and started walking up the driveway. He first began walking toward her but then sped up. My mom luckily made it to the front door in time and locked it. She told my dad, but he brushed it off and said it was probably some random creep or a crackhead, and they most likely wouldn't come back. A while later, her niece and nephew came to stay for a night while my dad was out fishing. In the middle of the night, they ran into her room crying, saying a tall man with a black hat had been standing over them. It kept happening every time they stayed over, until they eventually refused to come back. A while after that happened, my dad was out fishing again, when my mom heard a loud crashing sound coming from their spare room. It was a room with a pool table, a desk, and a couple of chairs. It sounded like all of the furniture was being violently thrown against the walls over and over. She freaked out, thinking someone had broken in, and immediately called her mom, who told her to leave the house and call my dad. My dad came home, and when they went inside, the room was completely untouched. Everything was exactly where it had been. After this, my mom refused to even step foot in the house if she was going to be home alone. Anytime my dad was gone, she went to her mom's house until he got back. But even that didn't stop whatever was going on. Not long after, an old, disheveled woman started showing up in their yard at night. She'd stand under the large oak tree in front of their house, mumbling to herself for hours. She did this several times a week. Around the 10th time, my dad finally had enough. He went outside and yelled at her to get the fuck off their property. She slowly looked up and whispered, "You can't take us all." Whatever that meant. He told her to leave or he'd call the cops. She turned around and walked away. They were both extremely spooked by this, but she never came back, so they forgot about it. A month or two went by, and they noticed that their electric bill had been very high for the past few months. My parents were very cautious with their energy use because they didn't make a lot and were trying to save up, so they were very confused. They contacted one of the owners of the house to come check for electrical issues. The house had belonged to two brothers who inherited it after their father died there. My mom didn't want to be alone when one of them was scheduled to come by, so she asked her mom to stay with her that day. Her mom knew everything that had been happening and decided to hang crosses on almost every wall in the house, including one above the front door. When the guy showed up, he literally stepped 1 foot across the threshold and immediately jerked his foot back and said he was actually going to call someone else to deal with it. Later, they found out through a neighbor that the brother's father was a tall, mean man who always wore a black hat. I guess he didn't want anyone living in his house. Anyways, by this point, my parents were trying to leave as fast as they could. My dad picked up 2 extra jobs just to get them out faster. They saved up every last dollar until they finally had enough to leave. Once they moved, everything stopped. Whatever was tormenting them left them alone. About a year later, they were living a normal life in a new house right across from my dad's parents. One night they were driving home from dinner and decided to take a shortcut. Out of nowhere, their car broke down in the middle of the road. When they got out, they realized they were broke down right in front of their old house. My dad immediately jump-started the car and got the hell out of there. That was about 25 years ago. Nobody in my family has had any strange experiences since then. The old house isn't listed anymore, and I have no idea if anyone lives there or if it's just abandoned. I've never gone near it and don't ever plan to. 204. I found out my best friend was the reason my engagement ended. I thought my best friend would be standing next to me at my wedding. Not the reason it never happened. When Ethan proposed to me, I was over the moon. We'd been together for 3 years, and he was everything I prayed for: kind, funny, patient. My best friend, Mia, had been there since high school, cheering me on through every heartbreak. She cried tears of joy when I told her about the proposal. Or at least, I thought they were tears of joy. A few months before the wedding, Ethan started acting distant. He'd cancel dates, avoid talking about wedding plans, and always looked guilty. I thought maybe he was stressed or scared, normal pre-wedding jitters, right? Then, one night, I got an anonymous message on Instagram. It said, "You should ask your fiancé about the girl he drops off every Friday night." I didn't want to believe it, but something in me, maybe fear, maybe intuition, needed to know. So I followed him. My hands were shaking as I watched his car pull up to an apartment complex. A few minutes later, Mia walked out. She hugged him. He kissed her. My entire world cracked open. I didn't confront them right away. I went home, printed the photo I took, and placed it in an envelope on his pillow. When he came over that night, his face went pale. He didn't deny it. He said it just happened, that they connected. Mia texted me later, saying she didn't mean to hurt me, that she fell in love too. I blocked them both. I cancelled the wedding. That was a year ago. I'm healing now. Therapy, journaling, slowly rebuilding trust in myself. But sometimes, when I pass by a bridal shop, I still feel that sting. Moved in with my grandmother and am now experiencing weird things. If you're a skeptic, I would love an explanation. No, seriously. Please. I need some logic to relax me, LMAO. To give me peace of mind because my family just had the weirdest night. This happened a little bit ago, but I can't make sense of it, so I figured I'd ask others. If there is a better place to ask this, let me know, please'll. My grandmother does not believe in the supernatural at all. I am, like, an agnostic believer. I can't prove ghosts are real, but I can't prove they aren't real either. So, anyway, we have 2 cats. If you're a pet owner, you know what it feels like to have cats or animals walk in front of you. You'll feel it. It's not something you pay much mind to, but you just know. So that night, my brother and I were in our grandmother's room, talking to her before bed. I'm sitting on this armchair in front of her bed. My brother is sitting across from me on her bed, and my grandmother is in bed. I thought I felt one of my cats walk in front of me. Like, I felt the little pitter-patter of footsteps. I automatically look down, as does my brother. There is no cat. I think that's strange and tell my grandmother and brother. My brother said he felt the same thing. My grandma thinks we're playing a prank on her. I tell her that's not the case. We drop it. My brother and I leave because my grandma is tired. I go to my room. My brother goes to sleep on the couch cause he's just visiting. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, I honestly cannot remember the time, my grandma screams. I get up, go to her room, and ask if she's okay. She tells me yes, she's fine, but she looks shaken. So I ask if she's sure, and she repeats she's fine. We all go back to bed. I'm in bed for all of 20 minutes before I hear a thump. It's not loud or anything, and at first, I assumed it was my brother on the couch. The couch is against a wall, so I thought he had moved so hard trying to get comfortable that it hit the wall. But when I get up, he's on the couch and this plant my grandma has in the corner of her hallway has fallen over. I pick it up and go back to bed because frankly, I'm too tired to be dealing with plants or ghosts or whatever this is. The next day, I asked my grandma if she was having a bad dream and if that's why she screamed, and she told me no. She said she felt something step on her foot in bed, and she thought it was one of the cats. So she turned on the light and noticed the cats weren't there. So she lay back down but didn't turn off the light, and then it felt like something had stabbed her foot, which caused her to scream. She checked, and nothing was there. My brother, who is unhelpful and has no answers, mentions the plant and how I must have knocked it over coming from Grandma's room. I told him no, not possible, because the plant fell while I was already in bed. I had been awake for a little bit when that happened. We spent the next hour like the Spider-Man meme, just pointing fingers at each other. But we were all in our beds when stuff went down. And it didn't explain the little pitter-patter of feet my brother and I felt earlier. So that evening, my sister and my niece, who is 9, came to visit. If you're wondering why we're all showing up at my grandma's house, it's because our grandfather died about 7 months ago, and my grandma hates being alone. I decided to move in with her because it's a shorter commute to my college. Also, we just love coming over here. She's a good time. LOL. Anyway, I let my sister and niece take my bedroom and sleep on the love seat couch while my brother is on the bigger one. I don't know what time it is, but my niece wakes me up. She says my curtains in my room fell, and I ask why she didn't ask my sister to get them. She says because I was already awake. I tell her that I was not awake, and she insists I was because she saw me staring at them in the doorway to my room. I'm too tired to really give a shit, so I'm like, okay, sure, and go to my room to fix my curtains. The following morning, when I brought it up, my sister said she slept fine. My niece said she slept fine after the fact, too. We have an electric run house, so no gas leaks. Is it possible that, since I'm so used to cats, that I just anticipated them running across in front of me? I also theorized that maybe my grandma, in her old age, was experiencing a form of sleep paralysis and thought she was fully awake. I don't have an explanation for the curtains or the plant. I don't know. I'd love to know if anyone else has any explanations. If you're wondering where my cats were, they had been underneath my bed for most of the night, the first night. They're usually both night owls, but I have no explanation for why they were under my bed that night. They just were. Sometimes cats be weird. The second night, I'm not sure where they were, so it's possible they could have knocked down the curtains. They don't really play with them, but I'm not going to say they never would. Ayo, if I break up with my boyfriend over his younger brother, I, 20F, and my boyfriend, 21M, whom we'll call Jake, have been together for a little over a year now. However, something happened yesterday that put me off. For context, I love this man to death. He is kind, funny, and genuinely a good person. We are visiting his parents for the first time since we've been dating, because they live across the country. Our flight landed 2 days ago when we met his parents, and at first everything seemed lovely. We hugged, they bought me a gift, and everything was going lovely except for one thing which, looking back now, was quite odd. They refused to let us room together. They said while under their roof I would take the guest bedroom and he would take his old one, which I was fine with. Then yesterday morning Jake's younger brother, 19M, whom we'll call Randy, arrived. Now I was not aware Randy was coming, but I was okay with it. Then at dinner, Jake's parents kept going on and on about how great Randy was, saying how he was pre-med at Brown and got in on a full athletic scholarship. Now I have no problem with them bragging about him, but then things went to hell. Randy started flexing and licking his lips in my direction. Yes, physically kicking his lips. This made me very uncomfortable, and when I brought it up to Jake afterwards, he blew me off, saying Randy was just getting to know me. I told him that was fine, but I still didn't feel comfortable around him. One thing led to another, and we had a small argument. Later on, while we were watching a movie, I went into the kitchen to get more popcorn, and Randy followed me. I tensed at being alone in a room with him, and he moved beside me and asked if I went to the gym. To which I tried to be civil and told him I did, and he responded that he likes a muscular woman. I said very plainly that I was in love with Jake and left the kitchen. When I went up to my room for the night, I just wanted to sleep. Just then Randy walked in behind me. I asked WTH he thought he was doing, and he said he was rooming with me. I told him that I didn't feel comfortable with that and said, and I quote, "Too bad, sweets, you're stuck with me." I walked out and went to Jake's room and asked if he would be willing to let Randy room with him. Jake told me he could try, but no promises. Turns out Randy hates Jake snoring, he has never snored, and absolutely can't sleep with him. So I simply decided to sleep on the couch downstairs. When I woke up this morning, Randy was sitting across from me just staring at me. I asked him how long he had been there, and he said a while. I asked him why, and he said he likes seeing me so defenseless and innocent. I asked him if he was effing serious and yelled that he was a effing creep and that he should just wait until I tell Jake. I stormed up to Jake's room and told him what happened, and he told me that that was just Randy and I needed to let it go. I blew my top off, which looking back was a bad move on my part, and just ended up escalating the whole thing. Things were said, names were called, and I ended up in a hotel. I am writing this lying awake and spiraling. So Reddit AIO. 3 years ago, my father suffered irreversible brain damage. He found something on my lawn that's fixing him. Like any great lie, it looked like a miracle. Without a word, Dad stood up from his favorite recliner, shuffled across the carpet, down the front hallway, twisted the brass knob, and set out into the dreary overcast. The screen door slammed shut behind him, punctuating his departure like a rattling exclamation point. My father hadn't done a single thing of own volition for 3 years. Not to say that his body was incapable, though. His muscles worked fine. The physical therapists I hired kept them strong. Most of his organs worked just fine, too. His heart pumped an adequate amount of blood. His stomach churned functional acid. The machinery was intact, but the part of his brain that controlled voluntary impulses had been damaged. He needed guidance and direction to perform any task. The stroke stole a lot of him, but agency was its cruelest prize. Through the foyer's bay windows, my eyes followed his lumbering movements across the yard. A dreamy mixture of bewilderment, hope, and vindication trickled down my spine. Warm honey smeared across ailing nerves, sticky and sweet. The doctors, the social workers, my brother, they'd eat their words. I knew he'd get better. Then, I watched him disappear from view, newly obscured behind a collected heap of fallen leaves. My heart fell through my chest. I shot up and bolted towards the yard. As my feet echoed against the hardwood, a medley of familiar admonishments paraded around my skull. Pay attention. Idiot. It'll be your fault if he's hurt out there. Who's really got the brain damage? Him or you? Thoughts of him bleeding in the street kept my pace fast and frantic. I flung the door open. The knob thudded against a nearby wall, leaving a circular indent in the plaster. But there he was, motionless on the stoop, nose pressed gently into the mesh of the screen door, soft blue eyes vacantly fixed forward. Icy whispers of approaching winter curled over his frame. The breeze made me shiver. I ushered my father inside and locked the deadbolt behind him. To my relief, he looked okay. No cuts on his arms, no bruises on his scalp, no visible injuries at all. What did you see out there, Dad? I asked, stammering. The question felt strange and delicate rolling over my tongue, like an embarrassing attempt at a foreign language. He didn't respond. In the years since his stroke, I talked to Dad plenty. He was the only other person in the house after all, but the conversation was effectively rhetorical. He'd never respond. Because of that, I shied away from directly asking him anything. Too painful. Instead, I stuck to saying things that didn't demand a response, like remember how much Mom loved the smell of lavender, or I can't believe how shitty the Cardinals are playing this year. Statements that acted as some peculiar median point between talking to myself and prayer. Dad pushed past me with surprising force and returned to his recliner. That's when I noticed he was thumbing something in his pants pocket, rhythmically dragging the digit across whatever he discovered on the lawn. Once he settled, I bent over him and lightly extricated his hand from the pocket, revealing a trembling wrist with knuckles tightly clasped around a small object. I pried his fingers open, wholly unsure of what I was about to find. It was just a leaf. A singular, unbroken leaf with 6 slender tips and an odd complexion. Bright gold with specks of jet black that seemed to drift under its surface continuously, like living film grain. The more I stared, the more the patterns seemed to change, specks ebbing and flowing through a sea of shimmering gold. Entranced, I moved my fingertips to touch it. His hand snapped closed around the leaf and shot back into his pocket. His other hand grabbed my shirt collar and violently pulled my head down. I felt wet heat as he put cracked lips against my ear and rasped. A deep, steady scrape of his vocal cords, barely audible, though, like the wind dragging the tip of a tree branch against a rusty gutter while you're trying to fall asleep, it sounded like an omen. One by one, I calmly peeled his skeletal fingers from my collar. His hands fell to his sides lifelessly. He resumed his usual afternoon activity, silently staring out the window, and I retreated to the safety of my own recliner. From across the foyer, I could tell he was still making the noise, even if I couldn't hear it. His Adam's apple never stopped quivering. Crazy as it may seem, I grinned. I'd convinced myself that, for the first time since his stroke, he was trying to speak. I didn't give Milo the good news immediately. My brother, the self-labeled realist, would require persuasion. He'd need something more meaningful than a few aberrant movements and some quiet rasping to accept he'd been wrong, and that Dad was getting better. So I watched, and I waited, confident that he'd be his old self again in no time. Miraculously, Dad didn't need prompting anymore. He'd eat of his own accord. He cleaned himself when necessary. He knew when to sleep and woke up at the same time every day. But he still wasn't speaking, and he never let go of that leaf. Then, about a week after his impromptu resurrection, he locked himself in my second-floor guest bedroom. A wrinkle in his upward trajectory, sure, but I reasoned that once I knew why, it had all clicked back into place. From outside, I couldn't hear the gentle hum of the TV, or the faint rustling of pages being turned. I thought the space was silent, but then I pressed my ear to the door. There was a sound. It wasn't the rasping of his vocal cords. It was a soft, persistent crinkle. Sounded like he was folding a sheet of cheap gift wrap into smaller and smaller squares. Hesitantly, I knocked. "Mind if come in, Dad?" No response. Once again, I pressed my ear against the door. The crinkling had stopped. With night looming, I considered calling an ambulance. Dad had been locked in that room for 8 hours. Surely, he needed to eat, I reminded him. Drink some water. Relieve himself. No matter what I said, though, he wouldn't come out. My finger hovered over the call button, but I paused. Did I really want to involve them, the police, the paramedics, maybe even the fire department? Would they understand? Or would they be like Milo, and only see Dad as something waiting to be discarded? A horse with a broken leg. I clicked the screen off and slid my cell phone back into my pocket. It wasn't worth the risk. The medical system had already tried to kill him once, and I wasn't willing to give them a second shot. I looked down the hallway, estimating how much of a running start the layout would afford me. 25 feet, give or take. Seemed like enough. I walked to the end of the corridor, aimed my shoulder at the locked door, and began sprinting. Seconds away from collision, there was a click. The door creaked ajar. Thick darkness like brackish water leaked through the slit. I skidded, sneakers squeaking, knees throbbing from the sudden shifts in momentum. My bicep kissed the old oak as I came to a stop, and the door creaked wide open. Humid air slithered over my skin, and the smell of it made me gag. The scent was revoltingly sweet. With a hummingbird heart, I peered into the darkness. 2 small golden rings glistened in the lightless deluge. A pair of wedding bands resting at the very bottom of the Mariana Trench. It was his eyes. Motionless, unblinking, and fixed squarely on me from the back of the room. My trembling fingers crawled along the wall, searching for the light switch. Dad's golden eyes pivoted noiselessly in the darkness, side to side and back again. He was shaking his head no. In a sensation akin to déjà vu, a brisk, powerful head rush, I sort of understood. He wasn't ready to be seen. Not yet. I stepped back, grasped the knob, and pulled the door shut. The crinkling resumed at a higher volume. Before long, something appeared at my feet, gliding under the frame and landing weightlessly on my sneaker. A leaf. It was like the one Dad brought in from outside, but much thinner, almost translucent, and its specks didn't drift, they were locked into place. Then, after a few seconds of crinkling, there was another, and another, and another.